Literally half past on the stream. We are live. So hello and welcome to the very first episode of We Follow the Town, a weekly podcast looking at and previewing Ipswich Town's games. And to kick us off to preview Blackpool at home, we have Stephen Lankaster and Graeme Brooks. I'll start off with you, Stephen. First of all, how are you and how are you feeling heading into this week's game?
Well, I'm not feeling too bad personally. I mean, going into the game, optimistic. I think they did make some good signings, albeit loan ones, and some good young players. But I think it's about setting into the formation really tomorrow and how they're going to hit the ground running. By all accounts, I think they've settled in really well. I hear some real positive stuff within the press, and what I know about it, I think the lads that have come in have looked to come in and sort of be very positive and good and vibrant, as new clubs would do. So let's just hope it, because all of us wanted to go up, don't we? All of us want to get in that position, at least into the top six, to give us a chance to move up into, obviously, the Championship again, which is where we deserve to be, in my opinion, although performances would suggest that probably we don't deserve it at the moment.
And to you, Graeme, how are you? And yeah, I'll repeat the question. How are you feeling heading into this week?
I'm good, thanks. I mean, I'm impressed with certainly Luke Matheson coming in. I remember him as a young 16-year-old that was like all over the national television when he got the goal at Old Trafford for Rochdale in the League Cup. I then went up. I don't know whether you'd say dedicated or completely mad, but I did the night trip up to Rochdale. We did corporate hospitality up there. It was a nightmare trip. The M62 shut both ways. I think I got back about 4 o'clock in the morning. But although Ipswich won 1-0 up there, he was the absolute standout player again. So I think he'll be a really good signing, and I think we need a good right back, come right side midfield, right wing to sort of move forward a bit. So yeah, I'm sort of pleased with, and I've heard good things from the Preston fans about Harrop as well. No idea about Parrott. I hear he's quite good up front, good on both wings apparently, being a Parrott. But we shall see. But what I'd like to see tomorrow is Parrott coming in, and if Norwood's fit, having the two of them play together. Because I mean, I was totally behind Lambert at the start, but some of the things he comes out with, about the fantastic football each week, and he actually quoted, he said that it was such a useless, or words to that effect, up front when they had two players. Look at the game last week. He suddenly decided to play two players up front in about the 70 whatever minute, and we got a goal back. But to me, Ipswich need to have two players up front, and they need to have creative players that give the service. People get on Norwood's back sometimes, but Christ, the service this year, they're too busy playing it across 3 foot outside the back four. You looked at the whole game, 70% possession. Hull were just wetting themselves 2-0 up away from home, and we're quite happy staying on the edge of our own area. The possession's there, but the actual killer ball was non-existent. But yeah, I'll go for a draw at best tomorrow. I just don't have any confidence that Lambert's going to utilise a formation.
So Stephen, what do you think the score will be tomorrow? Are you going to be more optimistic, or are you
No, I mean, after a very good promising start, if I remember, and please forgive me if I can't spot on, I just think that Blackpool outplayed us, didn't they, for most of the game last time, and ended up winning comfortably in the reverse fixture. I just think we've got to be a bit careful, but it depends, doesn't it? If we play on the front foot, I didn't think the start last week was too bad, to be fair, against Crewe. I thought we played pretty well for certainly 15, 20 minutes and looked as if we got a foothold of the game for once. But then, it's like Graeme alluded to a certain degree, we sort of look reasonable in possession, but we don't really sort of break down defences perhaps as much as we should. I think people set up against Ipswich notoriously because they know that they probably could actually come forward and score perhaps more or look more positive than they do. So it is hard to break down. I've seen, obviously following it very closely, you see that can be a case sometimes. But tomorrow, I think it would just be interesting to see how they settle in. It's a strange one for a lot of reasons, because Ipswich, in my opinion, again, I know a lot of the young lads, is that they've put a lot of people out on loan. You've got Corey and Brett playing today for Air, aren't they, tonight? I think they're live, actually. I've recorded it because I think it's about the same time as this. So
Brett's on the bench.
He's on the bench. Yeah, I did notice that, Graeme. Yeah, but they're two great lads as well to come in. So it'd just be interesting, and being an Ipswich lad, seeing all of the lads come through at different age groups from about the age of 7. I wouldn't underestimate how good they are. They may not be showing it at times, but I've been a very avid and we'll keep on about it. They will come good, a lot of them. I've seen them destroy teams throughout all the age groups, including your Chelseas, your Arsenals, your Tottenhams back in the under 12, under 13 days. So these lads are good, and don't just because we're getting people from the Premiership sides coming forward, don't think that some of these lads could not have been there when they were younger. So I hope obviously they do very well, because we want to get up into the Championship, but I wouldn't write off some of the young lads quite yet.
Still for loanees. We have bought in about 4 loanees. They are young as well. So yeah, like I said, players.
Well, I'll be a bit biased, so yes, I think we should play our own players. I mean, people forget, don't they, Ben? I mean, 3 years ago, that team, you look at sort of Flynn, you look at Wolfie, you look at Brett, you look at Jack, you look at a few others. Yeah, I suppose he's a little bit older, but, those guys were the sort of bedrock of the under-23s team a couple of 3 years ago, 3 years ago when they won the league, the under-23 league, and they were playing good Premiership teams such as Watford and people like that at the time. And yeah, of course I favour to keep those in the side, but they haven't performed. Some of them haven't performed. Games have bypassed some of them, but I think if you stick them in the team and give them a bit of a run, I think they would be just as effective as what we've got coming in. And that's nothing against them lads coming in, because they're coming in, they're good, they've got good pedigree. Graeme watch it a lot more. I didn't go away at Rochdale a couple of 3 years ago, or a couple of years ago when it was, or whenever. But these guys are good, don't get me wrong, I'm not disputing that, but I actually also think our players are promising, and given a fair run, I think that they could show it. So I suppose I'm saying, yeah, keep with our young ones.
Playing the devil's advocate, I've raised this question since he gave Lambert the 5-year extension, as we started to sort of lose game after game last season, and everyone said, oh well, that's been arranged and everything else. But if you start losing game after game after game, just the timing of the announcement of giving him this 5-year contract, I just ask the question. No one doubted when Evans came in, like in whenever it was 2007 2008, that he had got that ambition. He wanted Ipswich in the Premier League, and obviously he'd have his foot in the director's boxes with his hospitality business and everything else. But he had the ideal time. Love McCarthy or don't love McCarthy, McCarthy got us into that position in the January in a very poor league that he could have backed him. Equally, when we lost the playoffs to Norwich, I think we'd got something like 130,000 of transfer fees against 40 million against Norwich, who'd been in the Premier League the year before. We only effectively lost 1/2 to them. We drew at Portman Road deservedly. Berra got sent off, rightly so, for handball on the line. But Tommy Smith still got an equaliser in the second half, and we were still in that match. We were that close if Evans had backed McCarthy the following year, but he didn't. Now, I am just not convinced. I almost feel like Evans is thinking, if we go up to the Championship, I'm going to have to buy a shed load of players. I'm going to have to spend a hell of a lot of money, or I stay mid-table in Division 1. I can hide behind that 2.5 million, whatever it is, salary cap. Let Lambert take the flak. I can just sort of, and that suits my business model now. And when you look at the squad now, and you look at people like Jack, you look at people like Corey, that Corey's been farmed out, Jack's sort of getting in and out of the side. Personally, I can't see the guy that came from Barnsley, Thomas. I don't see any better player in him. Okay, he's come down from the Championship, but I don't see a better player there than than Jack playing. So I would ask that squad that we're limited to at the end of January. You've got people like Skews, who hasn't played a bloody game this season. You've got three senior goalkeepers at Division 1 level. So you could lose 2 senior players if Evans was serious. Lose at least 2 of those players. If even a third player that is not going to play very much, you keep the young players in. The Lankasters, the Nadabas, and you bring 2 or 3 more experienced players in to make those younger players. I lost the plot completely with Lambert at the Crawley game in the whatever it was, the Mickey Mouse Trophy that we played down there. And basically, he comes out with, I'm doing what the fans want, playing youngsters. He put that virtually the whole bloody under-19 team out in one go. We hadn't got matches for, I think, 10 days, 12 days after the Crawley game. We'd played Portsmouth in the Cup on the Saturday. So that time, Dazelle was suspended from the league. He could have had Dazelle in. He could have had 3 or 4 of the regular first team and nurture those youngsters. Yeah, he put the youngsters out. Christ, Crawley had played at Torquay and lost 6-5 after extra time. Crawley put their whole reserve side out that Tuesday night. So how does that give a confidence boost to your under-18s, under-19s, when 8 or 9 of them play? Lambert ain't got a clue, management-wise. And I know it's easy as an armchair manager, and I was totally behind him when he came in, but I'll be totally behind him when he gets his taxi back up to Scotland.
It was interesting this week to Stephen Moore.
Yeah.
He was asked about Paul Lambert. He said that Paul Lambert's man management is not very good. He also spoke how he was a very funny man in real life, in the back of the scenes, but on the pitch, in training, he was, like non-existent. He wouldn't interact with the players. He wasn't very fatherly, which makes sense. Who would you start this weekend? Because we do have some good players on the bench. You have Elton Barrett, who's just like an idea, actually.
I think he played today for the 23s, because I took a close look on 23s because I thought Jack might have to go to Watford today. But so a few of them actually played in the 23s today, Ben. I thought Elkin played. I know Amando did. The young Liam played as well, and there was a few others. Yeah, Keenan. Sorry, yeah, you're right. And I think there was a few. So I can't imagine if they'll be involved today that they'll be involved tomorrow. I mean, I don't know, obviously, but I think it will probably be more or less. Graeme alluded to it as well. The 2 new signings on the deadline day, as such, those 2 lads I can see probably coming into the squad, and then maybe did we, because Teddy got sent off, didn't he, with 2 yellow cards, so he won't be in the squad. So I think it will be more or less the same as Crew, albeit those 2 maybe different personnel. I don't know if you agree. Just look at me.
Basically, it's quite difficult for me because I've taken a sad one-man stand. Well, no, there's probably quite a few men stand, but I decided after Evans' statement prior to the Plymouth game, and then the ITSC statement, which I won't even go there because it's family listening. Do they represent the supporters, or do they do what the club tells them? But as far as that goes, I took the decision. I'd already paid for Plymouth, but after the Plymouth game, I said, right, I'm putting I've had a season ticket for 46 years. I did 17 out of 19 iFollow games. I'm a shareholder as well. I said, I'm not putting another penny into that club till Lambert goes. I've just had enough.
You have, Graeme. Because I sort of, and Ben, I sort of been following quite a lot closely. I've sort of been following yourself as well, and you've been very much historical in a lot of stuff you've done, Graeme, innit? Which is sad to see, really, because, I was very lucky. I don't know if we're going this sort of angle as well, Ben. I was very lucky as a young lad. I went to school on Portman Road. I went to St Matthew's School, which is the little Church of England school up there. I don't know if you know it, the 2 of you. And then I was born in Ipswich, and then brought up until about 12 when I moved to Bury St Edmunds, which I am now. And it is sad because, I even try and tell Jack. I remember as a young lad, he was just at the academy and Johnny Walk came in. Do you know what I mean? And I just love the stories. I don't know if you want this kind of thing, but I just love the stories because I was trying to tell Jack at the time that he was the Frank Lampard of his era. That was the nearest one, to relate to a young lad that just see who was one of my heroes, and that 81 team in particular. I mean, I was 7 at 78 and, of course, loved it and that sort of thing. But I actually went to all the matches in 79, 80, 81. Do you know what I mean? So and a little bit beyond, obviously, with me parents. And I was just trying to say, and I know we're not going to ever get back to that because it just doesn't happen. Although Leicester have proved that it can do to a certain degree, I suppose. But it would just be nice to get everybody thinking of that sort of family kind of run club that just people just talked about. But my dad belonged. He was an amateur in the '60s at Ipswich and stuff like that as a goalkeeper, and a little bit under McGarry and stuff like that.
Do you know what worries me the most, Stephen? I was so sad. I don't know if you've read my book, but
I haven't. I'd like to actually, Graeme. Yeah, I'd like to. I haven't read it at all. No.
No, I mean, get the plug in there, but no, I was so incredibly sad. I had like all these runs, like I'd not missed home games for like tens of years and everything, to the point that I'd like drive my wife mad that I'd go to Devon on holiday and still drive home for the midweek game and then go back to Devon, that sort of thing, and that's the sort of dedication that I did have at one time. But once you miss the first game, and I think the reason that I started missing some games, my daughter plays like high-level squash. She plays for Essex. She's in the England regional squad, etc. So at times you try and juggle and be like at a tournament and get back to going back to tournament and everything. But then it gives, and you think, right, the daughter's more important than the football, and then you miss, obviously, and then you miss one game, and then you think, oh, that was so bloody hard to miss that first game. But then when you miss that first game, and then it carries on in a cycle, and then there's another, and then I've almost fallen out of love with it. And that
you totally
don't. Lambert, O'Neill, and Evans. I mean, the three of them, I blame completely. I was so behind Lambert when he came. I mean, I went up to Accrington for the cup game, did the hospitality there. I actually, Andy Holt, who's an absolute legend of a club owner, if only we had someone like that, he got me out round to when the team turned up, had me on the pitch with Paul Lambert, giving him a copy of my book, and I was so behind the guy, but the bloke just, I think, all this about the wonderful football, the green shoots that Marcus Evans keeps saying, I think we're idiots. Maybe we are.
Yeah, there's so many like this on I mean, about 5 years ago, and 2 years ago, I would travel up to Tottenham about 13 times a year. We just thought, oh, they know for it. And I had that dedication. If we weren't in lockdown at the moment, I'm not being rude, I love my club to bits, but I wouldn't have the dedication to do that. What do you think the club can do to get those fans back into the stadium once lockdown is over?
I don't know. I think the biggest thing, I think there's still a certain amount of arrogance at the club that they sort of look as if there's not. I mean, let's be honest, we're not a rival to Norwich really anymore at the moment. We're almost more of a rival to Colchester, but the club almost looks that they've got this given right that people will attend. If it was any other type of goods that you were selling, if you kept getting the same old crap week after week, would you carry on spending the money? When you look at the money that you spend to go to Portman Road, you take a few examples. If you use like your Tesco club card points, etc., you could go down on the waterfront to Pizza Express, the four of you, and have a meal for four of you with a bit of reduction with the Tesco club card for less than me going along on a one-off basis to Portman Road or very similar. You could go down to Namco where they give out the cards at the football ground, go along and get your discount game of bowls. A family of four could go there for 20 quid, a lot less than you're paying for effectively it's third division football. Don't call it Division 1. Division 1, that was when Ipswich were bloody good years ago and we were up the top of that.
This is a really cool.
Yeah, and I just don't think the club takes it seriously enough that the competition isn't necessarily your Colchester, your Norwich or whatever else. It's the fact that there's other things that you can do as a family and probably enjoy more, to be perfectly blunt at the moment, for a lot less money.
I think the thing is though, Ben, it's a really good question because I think we're all feeling a little bit down, aren't we, if we're brutally honest at the moment. I've got to the age now, I don't do the sport and that like Graham's daughters and you probably at your age, Ben, do. So I just play golf. But we're all missing things, aren't we? Let's be honest about it. It's been a horrendous year. Let's forget football just for 1 second. And then if we think back to when you do get the club behind, you do get the supporters, the Blue Army, brilliant. You know, all the guys within the North Stand, you know, all the singing that was there. I hadn't heard times like that for Ipswich for a number of years, if I'm brutally honest, until the last 2 years before, obviously, all of this horrendous stuff. So the thing is, could it go back tomorrow and would it be the same? No. To answer your question, it's not going to be the same, is it? You're not going to have, you know, you'd probably be lucky to get 10,000 there, wouldn't you, to be honest, if we actually went back maybe next week, for example, if they pulled the lockdown earlier. But what I do feel is it isn't a million miles away from getting everybody back again and getting that momentum. Now, what that is, if I had the secret, I'd be able to tell you, and I'm sure everybody else was. But Lambert was able to do that. And I'm not trying to go back in time, but what I'm saying is a new manager coming in, as it was 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago. I remember I was there, as I think we probably all were, but you know what I mean, and viewers. And from that point until the end of the relegation season, let's be honest, that was the worst season for a lot of years, wasn't it? You know, there was a few good performances in it. I remember, you know, we had sort of back-to-back wins against Wigan and Rotherham, and I think there was a little bit of light at the end of thinking, Christ, if we can just get a couple more, maybe we'll get, you know, where we were adrift. And then there was a little bit end, you know, with Leeds and stuff like that at the end. But you look what the fans thought then, the supporters. There was a feel-good factor. I used to get to the club, I'd come early because I was taking Jack then and you'd go in and you'd have a pint or a couple of pints beforehand. The supporters were doing things. The outside was lively. There was a little bit of live music, all of that sort of thing. You know, some local bands had sort of come in. There was the coffee machines. You know what I mean? It was just lively, wasn't it, outside the club for the first time for a while. And so I don't think it's a million miles away, Graeme, it won't be if we went back tomorrow, as I said, but I don't think it takes too much to get people to come back and support Ipswich Town the way that it should be supported.
But just look, when the belief's there, look at the away fans. You know, we were taking mental amounts of away fans up there. You know, was it 4,000 or something to Milton Keynes on a Tuesday night last season? And, you know, some really sort of crazy. So
loads of teams did, didn't they, Ben? Loads of teams had to do that for a while away from home. I suppose my point is, yes, it's not looking great tomorrow, if that, you know, but I don't think it takes too much for. You just have to look at social media. You have to look at platforms like Ben has tried to do today. You have to look at the podcasts. There is a great fan base of Ipswich Town. Everybody has differing opinions. I get frustrated with some people's opinions, and they probably get frustrated with some of mine. So I'm not, but that's the great debates of football. And I don't think it's a million miles away, because you just think of all the people that take part in all of these sort of things, watch all these things. You know, Richard and the guys and Martin who are doing the Talk in Town now. I think they're regularly getting over 1,000 viewers for just what started as a relatively small podcast, but has just grown in time. And I think there's others, the guys that do it I listened to Malcolm on the Kevin Beattie Foundation on the Naked Radio show. That was brilliant, actually. I hadn't really listened to much of that. You can't do everything, can you? But I don't think it will take much to get it back, Graeme, I'm hoping. So I don't want you to get too disillusioned. And I'll keep promising you that you will have some good young players come to the fore. They just need a little bit of a run. I know I'm an optimist, but
I think we need Marcus Evans to actually become believable. Because if you ignore the last one where I've said I'm not going back till Lambert's gone, the previous, when he came out of his shell and actually spoke to everybody, I think it was the start of last season or the summer before last season. Possibly, but I actually swallowed everything he said, despite the relegation, the lot. I really did believe him that time, and he was all his 5-point plan, the lot. To me, is just one massive, great letdown. And whether we want Lambert, and I think most people do want Lambert to go now. I don't expect you to say anything, Stephen, but at the end of the day, whether we do or we don't, you know, the biggest problem that is Evans, because he has, and I know it's easy in hindsight, but Evans has made one decent appointment and his time had run, but McCarthy was the only successful manager that he has ever taken. Like, I mean, for God's sake, when he looked at Hurst, do you remember the list that he had? He had Frank Lampard, he had Scott Parker, He had the guy that was out in Sweden at Graham Potter. He had 3 of them were on the choice with Jack Ross and Paul Hurst. You know, but the problem I've got is I just have got no confidence. If Lambert went tomorrow, you can imagine like all these people that we'd like the Cowleys and Paul Cook, potentially those sort of players. And so where you go and buy your manager in Debenhams, you can imagine Evans been down at Primark as far as the managers.
Graeme, do you think, and Ben, I don't know, do you think Paul Hurst was the worst appointment at that time?
No, at the time I thought he was an absolute cracking one, but he was like a loose cannon when they got him in.
To be honest, yeah, exactly. If you're going to be honest, and we all, know what was said at the time, all of that sort of thing. He just obliterated what was a magnificent side. Let's be honest about it in comparison to where we are now. Not good enough necessarily to push for playoffs, but he was probably with a couple of. But at the time, I think
he was
90% of people probably thought it was a good appointment.
He was a top young English manager. He'd won Manager of the Year as Shrewsbury. They just lost the playoffs. My idea was he would come in and he would be able to cherry pick maybe 3, 4, 5 players of the top players from Division 1 or Division 2 that he'd come across. But he brought 13 or 14 players in, and then he comes out with all this garbage about, well, I wasn't intending playing them all. And you think, well, look at the size of the squad he had then. If you bring 13 or 14 players, you're going to end up with 7 or 8 in the team. And he turned a Championship side into a Division 1 side that was playing in the Championship, and we got what was coming. But, I've just got no confidence that if Evans pulls the plug that he'll bring anyone in. I think we need Paul Daniels as a manager now and wave a wand.
It's just that we're so negative at the moment, and rightfully so. We've seen what's happened recently. Someone put a stat in. We got something like 17 points from the last. 21 points or something from the last 17 games or something like that. Someone was saying, but so that's not good enough, obviously, for somebody.
Paul says it is.
But personally, are we a million? We win tomorrow. In this league, if you win 3 of the next 4 or something, I know we've got optimism because of new loan signings, etc. as we move forward, and everybody will have that feel-good factor tomorrow. But are we a million miles away from anything if we win 3 of the next 4, 4 of the next 6, 6 of the next 9?
The thing is,
we're going to be right back in it. Exactly, Ben. We're going to be right back in it.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, if we continue with Paul Lambert's 70% possession across the penalty area, one player up front and no service to that player. When we've played with one player up front in the past, whether you call it 4-5-1 or 4-3-3, when you've had that one player up front, you used to have players like the Matt Hollands, the John Walks that would maraud into that penalty.
But Graeme, that is their job to do, I think, in a system like that. And I can.
But we're not seeing it happen.
No, but that is an element of the players, though, isn't it? Let's be brutally honest, because we did see last week. The wingers, albeit not as creative as perhaps they should. Graeme just come back from injuries, great player, and then the new lad coming in on the right. They were playing more as a 4-3-3 in those first, and we did sort of press a little bit better, I felt, as a team. And I'd love obviously Jack to be involved in there as well. But there is an element of the players when you play a formation like that. You've got to take risks on the ball. You've got to start. Your perfect example. You've got to make runs into the area. Your midfield, your number 10 in particular, if you're going to play the more advanced person in there, have got to join the striker because there is an element of that, and I think that's what they want to play, but they haven't been able to show it because. We wouldn't be sitting here having this debate if they'd have continued in the same vein the first 8 or 9 games of the season, where they were scoring 3 goals in games, where they were creating a lot of chances, where they were winning the majority of matches with almost the same sort of team. But it's just because teams find out very quickly in this modern day, it's not like my era and other people's eras before when we used to play sport, is it? You can watch everything now, can't you? iFollow watches, we've got Air on BBC Scotland today. So everybody can watch anything and analyse everything. And I think Ipswich have become easy and predictable to play against because they were playing the same format. They were playing the same formation. They were playing the same. And we were all clapping and applauding, 8 or 9 wins out the first 10 or 11 games or whatever it was. Top of the league, scoring goals for fun, midfielders scoring goals, which is what you've just said, Graeme, quite right. Coming forward, making runs, And now it's just become a bit pedestrian.
You need to have that plan B, because you've hit the nail on the head, Stephen. It's so predictable.
Yeah.
So, well, just to mix the formation up more, like last week, I didn't watch it because you're well aware why I'm not watching it at the moment. But as far as it goes, they suddenly moved to playing like two players side by side up front, and just changed it. Which you've got these teams all worked Ipswich out, how they play week in, week out. They must hear the media and everything else, and Lambert, for him to come out, well, we're not playing two up front because we're rubbish or useless when we play two up front. Just saying that should be private in your own dressing room.
I'm not like, I seem as if I'm suddenly the sort of system and stuff. I'm not necessarily pro the system. If you want me to come off a fence, I think if your side is suited to 3-5-2, if I want, with the personnel that's available, in particular if Luke is a marauding right back, you could easily play. Miles had a great game last Saturday, Graeme. You obviously would have missed that, but probably read, especially first half. Miles played really well. He's athletic. He's up and down the pitch, and yeah, exactly. And I'd like to see Ipswich play that because the problem is if you start to play two in the middle in the modern game, you're going to be passed all around, even in League One. And I agree. I think you've got to have two players up front, or at least one playing off somebody. In my day, again, when you saw the sort of Mariner and Gates and then Brazil coming in and that sort of thing. But I don't think the formation is necessarily wrong. And I'm going to probably go on. I think it's the fact is we're not far enough up the bloody pitch, when it worked early on, it did. And you've just got to press. You've just got to get your people up there because you can actually, if you've got Guillaume with his pace, young lad Thomas or Jack or whatever you want to play on the right, if you push, you are almost playing free up front, really. And that's what we've not done enough of. But last week for 15, 20 minutes, I don't know if you agree, Ben, if you watched it, but for 15, 20 minutes, I felt we did do that. Although we never, ever looked like necessarily scoring in that first part, we certainly pressed better than I've seen for a while. Yeah.
Do you want to get back to the Blackpool game? I'll give you my team. It could be a little bit controversial.
Apologies for the sound issues here. Let me know if you can hear me because I've literally just changed the settings. But I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Is it Paul Lambert or is it Marcus Evans?
Equal doses, both at fault.
So I'm going to read a few comments here. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined today. Malcolm Thompson has said, next manager should be either Dyer or Luke Chambers. What do you think of that?
Well, if we had to have a new manager, can I say that?
Exactly.
If we had to have a new manager, I'm slightly different to Graeme. Luke has been brilliant for the young lads. All right, he gets his criticism at times. There is nobody I've come across in all the years that I've seen Ipswich and be as close to it, certainly over the last few years. I can only say what an absolute brilliant role model that guy is. His family, himself, everything. When certainly when 5 or 6 what I call really good players now within that team, your Flynns, your Jacks, your Coreys, Brett, they all live there, and he was so good to them, so acting a professional. And each and every one of those young lads is a proper role model and a lot to Luke. In terms of Kieran, I think you've got the opposite. He's a great lad. He's brilliant for the youngsters, apparently, over the training ground, and he's an England international. He's a brilliant role model in that sense. He would have they'd have grown up. They'd have grown up and known about Kieran Dyer, the great. The England international, last England international probably that played for Ipswich, and you've got that sort of sense as well. So for me, if Lambert had to go for whatever reason, they would definitely be somebody I would consider. I'm
not disputing either of their credibilities. They've all got pros, and I'm sure there's some cons against them as well. My problem is just the whole way the club's set up. Because if you look at McCarthy was effectively being the manager, and he was doing a lot more around the club as well. You've now got Paul Lambert, and then I'll stay polite, but you've got the ex-PE teacher as the director of football or whatever other role we might. To be honest, I I rate him about as high as a chocolate teapot or a chocolate fireguard, in my opinion. If you bring someone like Luke Chambers or Kieran Dyer in, you need to have a very experienced supporting director of football, and that is not Lee O'Neill. So I'm not ruling either of those two out. But for all that Luke does for the youngsters and everything else, the guy's going to go insane within the first 2 weeks of working as a manager for Evans. You need to have that proper structure, and then you could potentially.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, that would be ideal for me at this moment in time, and I've explained the reasons why it would be in both of their cases. But maybe with it, you're probably right, Graeme. If they had an experienced, good, not a Neil Warnock. I know he's not going to leave Middlesbrough, but that sort of example of person that knows Harry Redknapp of old, maybe 10 years ago, 10 years ago, doing the wheeling, dealing, doing the administrative stuff, doing the management stuff, that sort of thing. Yeah, you're probably right. They probably do need something like that in their first managerial post. You are right, yeah.
So let's get into the match preview because we've held it off long enough now. So, here are the news before kick-off. Kane Vincent-Young, as reported by TWTD, this is a bit off topic, but he has suffered another setback. He will be out for another 6 weeks. How much of a blow is this to our squad, as he was literally just back out on the grass? And when a player gets injured, how does it affect their confidence?
What are the sports scientists doing at the club? Because you look at people like McGoldrick, Webster, when they were at the club, like, Christ, they could have auditioned for Casualty or Holby City.
McGoldrick hasn't been injured since, has he?
Yeah, exactly. And Webster as well. They leave. There's got to be something to do with the whole setup at that club, because there's injury after injury, and it can't just be coincidence.
Jack, you probably know the ins and outs of it. I don't probably need to say too much. He had a stress fracture even before he started that run when he was 18. We didn't know, nobody knew. And it was only when he was signing his long-term deal and a few other little things might have been happening in the background, which we can do for another day with a few beers, but that he needed to have a sort of MRI scan. And it was only then that they found that he had a stress fracture. And they were brilliant for him, to be perfectly honest, in that period, because you just have to rest on something like that. You have to be operated on. You're never, let's all touch wood, you're never likely to get any issue again with that as you move forward. But in terms of Kane Vincent-Young, because I can relate that to Jack, there is dark times. Footballers, especially young footballers and young lads that have only, at the infancy of their career, let's say, that, they do need strong family support. They need strong club support. They need all of the guys like yourselves, people within social media these days, to support them, because there's nothing more than that lad Kane wants to do is to play football. And to be so close and to be raring to go again and then to break down again for whatever reason, I don't think they've fully said the reasons behind it. I reckon that's really tough for him, especially in the times that we've got at the moment. And God knows what he does from this time, other than to be patient. I've got a good mate of Jack. Good mate of Jack's Ben Morris in exactly the same situation. That lad is a talent. He scores goals for fun. He played in the same season that Jack broke into the team. Ben was brilliant. He came in, I think, in those early days of playing under Paul Hurst in a couple of. And then he's had 2 bad injuries as well. You couldn't, throughout his whole career earlier, youngster and stuff like that, played every game, couldn't remember him missing anything. And it is tough for these lads. And I wish him well, obviously, in his recovery. Is it to do with the sports science, Graeme? I mean, they'll be able to answer more than me. It does appear that there is a lot more injuries at Ipswich than anywhere else at the moment, but there's also Ipswich also have a much bigger squad, Graeme. Do you know what I mean? Did someone say in the East Anglian the other day that they had 51 players that have signed as a professional? Is there any other club in this division got 51 players?
No.
I don't. No. So if you're going to have 51 players to have a percentage of your club injured, then obviously you're going to have a more numerical amount, aren't you?
Anyway, just a quick question. Malcolm Thompson has asked, Graeme, what do you think about getting Derek Bowden back?
Yeah, I personally think we're more in need of an experienced director of football. He did an absolute wonder when he left Ipswich. I think it was Essex Cricket Club, wasn't it? He moved down to it. Did wonderfully well there, and he was always a I met him a couple of times. Really, really nice guy. Haven't had any problems with him. But I just think at the moment that the whole, sort of the way the club's run, the scouting setup, the whole lot. I just think it's crying out for a director of football, someone that, I mean, I know he's not in the equation, but Warnock was a great example. When Roy Keane came to Ipswich, I was like really excited. He'd got all the contacts in the game, etc. But obviously he'd got them as contacts, but every time his mobile went off and it came up on their phone, Roy Keane, they just put decline, But you need someone that's got those contacts that can just pick you out the gems. I mean, I love the setup at Brentford. I can't remember the chief exec there, Cliff somebody or other. I met him when I did hospitality down there when they were still at Griffin Park, and he's a really interesting guy. And he basically ran through that they got fed up with the academy because they basically, and you'll probably relate to this, Stephen, they brought these players through from 9-10 all the way through, but in the location they were in, the Chelseas, the QPRs, then said, right, thank you very much for next to little money. So what they did in the end, they decided to jack in the cost of running the academy and set up a really good coaching network out in countries like Denmark, Belgium, places and the Eastern Bloc countries as well, and pick up these bargain players. And also in the lower leagues, they picked up, I think it was was it Hogan or Gregan or someone that picked up for 750,000 and then had a good run out of him for, I think it was about 18 months, and then they sold him for 11-12 million to Villa, and that then funded the next, and they move on. And you look at them, they got shot of that who we were looking at reportedly, Ollie Watkins, when he was down at Exeter, I think it was. We were supposedly in the running, but I think he cost like £49 instead of £48. Evans pulled out of it and he went to Brentford. And then look, they sold him for 26 million or whatever to Villa. But then straight away they've got all their scouting network. They look at a player, Tony at Peterborough. They worked out, he could step up. And he hasn't looked back. He's replaced him, and they do it time and time again. And I mean, I've got a real soft spot because one of my mates is a Brentford fan, but it's just an alternative way to run it. If you can't, I know we've got promising players coming through, as Stephen's already said, but that is an alternative way of maybe making you battle against the big boys a lot more successfully than Ipswich have done in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I just on that. I mean, I can remember sort of going down to Brentford and playing. I mean, it was never the academy there that we've got at Playford Road. Sorry, on that. I don't. Is it? Yeah, it must be all about preparing professional footballers for the first team. Of course, it is with an academy, but only a handful are ever going to do that. If you look at appearances and stuff like that, I think there's only a handful of people that have come through that have made sort of 50 appearances plus or something. I think Joe Fairs, who's brilliant on sort of social media and the support for the academy, was kind of putting a quote up there the other day. But is it much more than that? It's good about the club being in the community. It's good that people thinking they're belonging to Ipswich Town. Yes, there is only a handful of people that will eventually make it, but I don't know. Some people out there will be a lot hardened to me, and I understand that. And they probably think it costs too much money and all of this sort of thing for the end. But I think there's also an awful lot of other things that are positives with that, rather than just about making money with the community structure, the development structure, the elite structure, getting a whole new fan base. I mean, Ben would have started at a very young age. He's a lot younger than us, a bit like myself. I went and played on Monday night down Portman Road on that used to be the AstroTurf circuit, not outside the first team, but along on that little park there. They used to have the radio thing there, which is now a sort of adventure playground. There you go. That sort of shows it now. We used to play there on a Monday night as kids. Do you know what I mean? But we were all part of Ipswich because it was part of Ipswich. You got a T-shirt, you got whatever as you move on. So I think it's bigger than that for me personally. And I think Brentford will miss that. They certainly won't miss the money and perhaps, you're right, Graeme, the diversion of where they get their players from.
So anyway, the team news heading into this game, total NCR end, unsurprisingly James Wilson and not yet fit enough to start. Keenan Bennett, as we mentioned earlier, is back on the grass alongside Cole Skuse, and James Norwood could also be back, having trained well as of late. We are likely to play a 4-3-3 or maybe even a 4-2-3-1. That could probably be debated. Who would you? Well, we already went through this earlier. But would you start Kenlock out on the left again because Stephen Ward is getting back to fitness?
Do you want my team then for tomorrow? Some controversial?
Yeah.
I'd go for Holy in goal, obviously. Well, not obviously in some cases. I'd go for Matheson on the right full back. I'd go for Chambers in the middle alongside Wolfenden, which might be a little bit controversial. I'll come on to that in a minute. And Kenlock, I think he did enough last week from what I've heard to keep his place. I'm not saying this because there's a certain person sitting opposite me, but I would put Jack Lankaster on the right-hand side.
I'd agree.
I'd go Downs and Harrop in the middle and Edwards on the left. I'd go Norwood if he's fit and Parrott up front. The reason I'd go for Wolfenden over McGuinness, well, personally, one of my bugbears sometimes is that he's one of our own. Wolfenden, I don't know what the hell's happened down at Playford Road, but Wolfenden was a Premier League transfer rumour last season, and he's a shadow of himself there. But I think there's a player in there, and I personally think playing with that bit of experience with Chambers, I've always thought that Wolfenden and McGuinness don't quite sort of work together, maybe in experience, I don't know what. So I'd go along with that. Lankaster on the right of midfield. I just personally think whenever he does get given a chance, and I'd have him in the team and keep him in the team for at least maybe 5-6 games. He's young. He's not going to be an 8-9 out of 10 every week. But, rather than sort of have a not quite so good game and then, no, that's him out of the squad or whatever, keep him in and let him have a run and see what he can do. He's one of our own, and I haven't seen anything from Thomas so far, from what I've heard, that he's better. So get Jack in the side. Because at the end of the day, all these loan players, I mean, Lambert 2 years ago slated Evans virtually in a nice way, saying we can't carry on with having all these loan players.
As did our director of football, ironically.
Yeah. So now we've got 6 loan players 2 years later, one that can't even be in the matchday squad. All these loan players, it's a bit like you having a house that you're renting. You're actually paying the money for someone else. There's no actual end return. And sometimes you'd even question, things aren't quite going right. These loan players, are they really as bothered? Because they ain't going to be here at the end of the season in most cases. Anyway, but I'd have Lankaster in on the right. Harrop, I'd like to see because he's supposed to be good with dead ball and opening up. Norwood, I get so furious with people getting on his back on the social media. I know he's a bit of a clown sometimes, and he probably invites it. Like out injured whilst he's climbing off the top of his car in through the bedroom window and bloody things and putting it all over social media. Hey ho! But I personally think if you give that guy the service, Division 1, he will stick the ball in the back of the net without question. And I think having Parrott alongside him as well, and actually going for it with a 2 up front rather than this 3-4-3-3 or 4-5-1, however I just believe that will maybe make the difference. But I'm sure Paul Lambert's got a completely different set of ideas to me.
Stephen, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think they'll be much different in the last game, if I'm honest. I mean, how deep do we want to go in? I think the young lad that's come in at right back obviously has got good pedigree playing in that division for Rochdale. He's gone to Wolverhampton, hasn't figured much obviously there, but so played a lot of under 23s football. He was saying, I think in the media, that he only signed at 4:30. I know myself how that all works, obviously, and that sort of thing through this window myself with Jack, but that would suggest to me that perhaps they knew maybe about Kane, and then he was just coming in as cover, possibly. So I still think they'll start with Luke on the right. I think that I would always play Luke Wolfenden as well. I would always play him. Yes, people are right. Maybe it's a confidence factor or not, but that lad can play. And we all talk about having these lads that are coming into League One on loan. This was a lad that League One, the Premiership wanted from League One. Don't forget that, and not many months ago. So I'll definitely have him. To be honest, I would have Mark now with him as well. Obviously, on the basis, I don't think Toto's done a lot wrong this season. To be honest, I know he makes a few sort of rash challenges, but he stops a lot of efforts and he wins a lot in the air. I would keep Miles. You can't play a game like he did, in particular the first half, and then not continue with him. And he does offer an outlet down there getting forward. I think they will play 5, Graeme, or 4-3-3, but I think they'll play 5. I would start Jack on the right. That's not out of biased and stuff like that. I've seen plenty of stats come in. I get them all fed to me as well, and people send me stuff all the time on it. On average, Jack's only played 45 minutes a league game this year, even though he's played 13 of them. His average is either he scores, he assists, or he plays a killer pass at least once a game. That is statistically correct in a 40-foot. If you say he's done that, he's already scored 2, assisted 3 times, and made plenty of sort of what they call smart passes, I think, in the game. So I think Jack offers it. I think he hasn't had the run that he probably deserves, so I would play him. But then, to be fair to the young lad that came in, I'm not his biggest critic at the moment in time, because although I think he hasn't provided anything in terms of going forward and chances, I think he has pressed. He probably offers a little bit more directness than Jack, who will retain the ball more, maybe come in. The lad last week, certainly in those first 20 minutes, as I said, him and Guillaume got very much forward, and I felt they played 4-3-3 early on. So I would go that way, but I wouldn't be surprised if he plays the young lad as well that he's got on loan. I would keep Andre, if you're going to play 3 in the middle, I'd keep Andre, Flynn. I think it might be too soon for the young lad to come in from who's just been on COVID. Maybe he'll start on the bench. I don't know. Obviously, I don't get any of that sort of stuff. But so I would probably stay with Judge. I know I'll get shot for that, but I think he's much better in the middle. I think his energy in the last few games has been actually pretty good, if I'm brutally honest. I'd keep Guillaume on the left, and then I would unfortunately I'd go with Norwood for all the things that Graeme said. He looks like he's going to score, doesn't he? He may have to have 1 or 2 more chances, but the lad is marauding. He's a bloody menace for defenders. If you put it the other way, he would give Luke and Mark a tough time, wouldn't he? 2 young lads. He'd have every trick in the book. He'd run off them. He'd run channels. He'd come deep. He'd go, a bit lazy, look as if he may be offside, then come back. He'll keep defenders on all the time. So that's the side I'd like to start tomorrow, but we will see.
Yeah, and as for Blackpool, they are in a position behind us. They're 12th. If you look at their squad, though, they have some recognisable faces in Grant Ward and Luke Garbutt. Could they spring a surprise, maybe?
Well, you'd have to say they beat Ipswich quite comfortably last time, didn't they? So you'd have to say, would it be too much of a surprise? No, I think Ipswich will win. I think Ipswich will probably maybe no goals first half, and then stupid stat, isn't there, at the moment that they haven't led at half time for records, isn't it? Yeah, it's records, isn't it? I think Ipswich will run out tomorrow, 2 or 3-0, maybe all second half goals.
Graeme?
I'm still. I think we've got the squad, we've got the players that we can win, but I'm just not convinced. 1, that Lambert will set them up correctly, and 2, it'll be way too late before he does his normal substitution. So I'm going probably 1-0 down at half time. I'm going to stick with the stat of not scoring a goal, and then 1-1. Norwood in the late 80s, I think, to get an equaliser, and then it will be talking about the possession football and how great we play and the green shoots.
We didn't have that last week, Graeme. We didn't watch it last week. I don't know if you saw the stats. It was the first time for a while, and I think it was the first time since we played Crewe previously. I think they had more. Didn't they have more possession, Ben? I think Crewe had more possession than Ipswich. So it was a different sort of way that they played, in particular in the first half last week, Graeme, which was a little bit, like I say, maybe giving possession away, but pressing a little bit more,
Yeah, the last one that I watched was the Sunderland game, and God, if that was an advert for Division 1 football, I mean, it's like the blind playing the partially sighted. They just needed a bell in the ball, really, didn't they? It was awful entertainment, and Sunderland probably just about shaded it, but I mean, that was probably they were the least worst side rather than the better side.
Although we actually played well, and this is a very controversial opinion, but we actually played well against Crewe. like in the opening 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Go on to win.
Yeah. I thought that was our best opening 20 minutes for a long time. I felt, like I said, I thought there was energy, there was pressing, and Guillaume and Luke, to be fair, the new Luke Thomas as well, I thought they pressed, and I have to say it as I see it, and I felt they pinned them in a little bit more, but we didn't penetrate again, did we? Do you know what I mean?
Counter as well. I thought we were very vulnerable against their counter.
Because we pushed.
during the Crew game, though, there was was it an injury stoppage or something, and Stuart Watson picked up on it. The crew manager was absolutely animated and getting all these players to do, and like Lambert and Taylor were like slumped against the advertising hoarding or something, like they'd almost given up on life. I mean, I really don't like the bloke, don't want him to be Ipswich, but I've got every sympathy that he's suffered from COVID. I'd never wish any harm on him or whatsoever. But if the guy isn't well enough and fit enough, then he shouldn't be sitting there. I mean, we keep seeing all these excuses like that he's not showing up, whether it's because he's fallen out with the East Anglian now because they've actually called up what most supporters feel, but he's not doing the interviews now. Yeah, he's well enough to still do interviews for BBC Scotland and give his opinion on Celtic and everything. He ought to actually remember who's paying his wage.
But in my opinion, and I've seen a lot of people say on Twitter, oh look, the players aren't playing for the manager. In my opinion, they are, and you could see that against the Crew. And I reckon this weekend...
Well, and the match before, when they went down to 10.
Yeah, and I reckon this weekend it's very much be the same. I reckon we will play good football.
I hope so. Look, that's the thing here, isn't it? What a wonderful sport football actually is, isn't it? It's not like Graeme was saying about his daughter playing squash. It's not like an individual sport, is it? There's so many opinions. We could have, whether I show a bit of a bias towards Jack or Graeme wants the younger ones to play or Ben thinks that one of the new signings. Football's such a great game. We just miss it all, don't we? We miss going in, like I was saying earlier, having a drink or something before a game, going up there, if I went with my dad or something like that to the match, looking forward to it. You talk in the car, you got the radio on. Everybody is just missing it, aren't they, really? And this is why I think a lot of we are compressed as well, compressed and probably depressed with what's going on at the moment, because it isn't great. It doesn't give us that release, does it, of what we've had for years, really.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect way to end the podcast, because football is very important for many people's mental health, especially in lockdown.
Yeah, spot on, Ben.
So anyway, thank you very much for those who have tuned into this podcast. I've really enjoyed hosting it myself with two excellent guests, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Good to speak to you, Stephen.
Yeah, and you too, Graeme. We'll have to meet up and you'll have to give me a copy of that book or I'll have to buy it.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. I'll message you later on.
Appreciate that.
So Graeme, where can people find your book?
Probably the best bet is if you go on to www.adventuresofatractorboy.co.uk, and then basically there's probably one of the best tabs on there is round the world, and there's over 200 photos on there from 52 countries, some really well-known people, other obscure ones, and we just keep getting the photos sent in from all round. And then on the first page, on the home page, there's a link to Amazon, and you can pick a copy up from there.
Perfect.
And all the profits of the Colchester Special Care Baby in it. It's made over £2,500 now already. So.
Well done. I'll definitely take a look at that again. Thank you very much.